The Glock 17 pistol has been around since the mid-80s. It is a proven, well-established handgun that is recognized around the world for its reliability. Now today, we're going to take the Glock 17 and I'm going to show y'all how to disassemble it and reassemble it all the way down to its smallest component. Let's head over to the bench and get started. This is our Glock 17 Gen 3 that we're going to use today for our disassembly and reassembly video. Let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we've got to do is get the top end off of the bottom end. And the easy way to do that is 1, make sure there's no magazine in it. 2, make sure there's no ammunition in it. Now we're good to go. So the first thing you want to do is pull the trigger, release the striker, and then you've got your little lever here, and there's one on the other side. You're going to push the slide to the rear slightly and down on these levers, and the slide comes right off. Super simple and easy. Now we're going to disassemble the top end, as that is, in my opinion, a little bit easier to do than the bottom end. So the first thing we're going to do, if you've got a threaded barrel on your pistol, we're going to move whatever type of muzzle device you have attached to that, unscrew that, we'll set it to the side. Next is going to be our guide rod assembly. That just pulls out and sets to the side and wants to roll. And then our barrel. Barrel comes out and we set it to the side. And we're pretty much gutted out on the front end up here. Now we've got to deal with the back end. So with the back end, what we're going to do, you can see here we've got our striker assembly. Pull that to the rear. If you push down on your little plunger here, notice you can float this little piece back and forth. So push that to the rear. Next, we're going to take a small punch, and there's a little plastic piece right inside here. We're going to put our punch in that area. We're going to pull down. Sometimes it's easier to just set it on the table to do. We're going to push down on that toward the table, and then just push the back plate off, and then release the little plastic piece. Nothing to worry about. There's nothing that's going to spring out, jump out at you. So we've got our back plate off. We'll set it to the side. Now we're going to take the rest of our internals out. We have our striker assembly. Set it to the side for a moment. We're going to finish disassembling it in a second. And then we have our extractor rod assembly with the rod, the spring, and the little plastic plunger. Put that to the side. Now we've got our extractor plunger, and spring. Easy way to do this is just depress the plunger and take it and tip this over in your hand. Tap it. Sometimes it'll fall out. Sometimes they're a little sticky. All right, so we'll tap it a little more. There it comes out. Now we've got our extractor out. Put that to the side. Now we'll release pressure off of our safety plunger. Same thing. Little tap, and it comes right out. Obviously, I'm working with a firearm that gets shot some, so I'm going to have some dirty fingers here. But now you can see inside of the pistol is stripped of everything except the plastic channel liner that's inside the slide. And unless your striker or striker spring is binding on the plastic channel liner, I don't recommend removing that. So we're just going to leave that in place today. All right, so now we're going to disassemble our striker assembly. So I went and grabbed a 9mm socket, which slides right over this. You can also use a 9mm shell casing if you don't have a 9mm socket laying around. So we're going to put our socket over the back like this. Set the striker assembly down on the table. We're going to pull down on the striker spring. And then just pop our spring cups right off. Spring slides off. And then the striker assembly slides out. Now we have our striker disassembled. We're going to move on to the bottom end. Okay, now let's tackle the frame. First thing we're going to do with our frame, everything on the frame is going to come out from the left side to the right side. And we're going to reassemble the exact opposite. We're going to reassemble from the right side to the left side. So let's get started with all of our pins. Got a little small 1/16 punch here. We're going to remove the rear ejector housing pin. It just pushes out. Next pin we're going to remove is going to be this bottom pin here. And the easy way to do that is to put pressure on the pin and wiggle your slide release up and down to get it to release. Okay, got it started. Slide that one out. And then our slide release, we'll just go ahead and pull that out, set it to the side. And now our top pin, same way, push, set it to the side. The next is going to be the locking block. Use your punch to lift it. Once you get it pulled up a little, slide it right out with your fingers. Now the entire trigger assembly just pulls out. We'll set that to the side and come back to it in a few minutes. Okay, now we're going to take our trigger assembly and take it apart. So we're just going to pull out on the trigger, release the trigger assembly and the spring, unhook that from the ejector housing, and unhook the spring from the back of the trigger bar itself. There we go. Put that to the side. Now we have our ejector housing and our connector. Take a small screwdriver, slide it in on the back side, give a little twist, pull your connector out. Now your ejector housing is disassembled as well. You can also take a pair of pliers and pull the ejector out of the housing itself. The ejector is the little metal piece here on the end that's inside the plastic housing. You can pull that out if you want to. There's no real need to, unless you've broken a housing and you don't have an ejector. But I normally just buy these as a complete assembly. We have our takedown lever, so we're going to remove that. These can be a little aggravating, and one thing you want to watch out for when you're reassembling is to make sure that this little sharp edge is facing the rear of the pistol. You notice on the front side, it's nice and smooth here. The smooth side goes forward. The sharp edge here goes to the rear. Now what we're going to do is a little flat spring inside here. We're going to depress that spring and just push this out. Sometimes easier said than done. There it went. Just push it. You can see a little spring in here. Once you get it depressed down, your takedown lever will just fall out. Now we have it out. You can see what I was talking about with the little ledge. And then the other side is smooth. Then we can pop that spring right out. Here's the spring that came out. Empty slot there. If you notice with the spring, there's a little foot. The little foot is going to engage with your takedown lever, and the straight part here on the rear is going to go back into the frame. Last part to remove from the frame is going to be the magazine release or magazine catch. Same thing, we're going to use our little small flat screwdriver. Put your index finger on the magazine release on the right side and hold it in. Then we're going to drop our screwdriver in here. Let me see if I can get a little more light on this. Just a little twist of the wrist pops that spring out of the groove. And then we can pull our magazine release out and toss it to the side. The little spring's still in here. I'm not going to pull that out today, but if you need to, a pair of needle nose pliers, you can pull it out. And there's a hole in the bottom that spring goes back into. You see inside here, you can see down there at the bottom where there's a little, like a little V, and the spring goes into the bottom of that V. There we go. So all you have to do is just drop it back in there with a pair of needle nose pliers and give it a little push, and that goes right back in place. Super simple. Okay, now we're ready for reassembly. Same thing, we're going to put our little spring back in first. Just kind of laid it down in there. Give it a little push with your finger, or you can take your screwdriver and push it down with your screwdriver. Next, we're going to put our takedown lever in. If I can get it to focus here. Come on, be a good boy. There it is. We're going to put that back in and make sure that your hook faces the rear of the pistol. The easy way to do this, start the takedown lever in until it's just short of the spring. Take your screwdriver, depress the spring. Slide your lever in until it clicks. Spring jumped up, it's down in the little pocket on the inside here. Everything is retained like it's supposed to be. Next, we're going to put the magazine release back in. Now, when you try and put your magazine release back in, you'll go in from right to left, and it's going to hit the spring inside here. We'll get a little light where you can see. There we go. See the tip of it is hitting that spring. Can't get it past it, right? What you have to do is slide a small screwdriver in from the left side to the right side and pull that spring out so your magazine release will go past it, like this. Next, we're going to put our magazine release catch back in the notch. You can see a little notch over on the right side. We're going to push the spring over with our small flat blade screwdriver and in until it snaps into that slot, as such. And now you can see how the spring is behind the magazine catch and locked in place. Functions properly. All right, and let's put this little guy back together. First, we're going to put our connector back in. The little L-shaped foot goes in the slot at the bottom. Push it all the way in until it's flush at the bottom. And you should have about 1/8 of an inch gap at the top. Depending on the connector, it could be a little tighter. You could have one that's in about like this or out like this, all depending on the connector and how it's set up. Next, we're going to install our trigger return spring. We're going to turn it where the hook is facing down, and that's going to go back in this hole here. So it's going to hook over and back through this hole. Now we're going to put our finger on the back to hold it in place so it doesn't fall off. Now we're going to take our trigger bar and we're going to hook the trigger bar onto the other end of the spring. Now we've got our spring connected. We're going to make sure that the spring end drops down inside the housing here. We're going to pull everything forward. Hook the little cross in, that slot on that side, and then the trigger bar is going to go under the connector here. We pinch it and we hold it like this. If you let it go, sometimes it'll kick out, pop out like this. All you have to do is just rock it back down, pinch it with your finger, and put it back under the edge of the connector. Now we're going to put the whole assembly into the frame. We've got our frame here. Trigger is going to kind of line up with the trigger slot, ejector housing in the rear in this slot. Notice I've still got it pinched at the back so it all stays together. And then we're just going to push everything back in the frame. Next is our locking block. The bigger ears go to the bottom. These go forward on top of the frame rails. And this is going to drop down in the slot right on top of the trigger. just like so. Next, we're going to put our ejector housing pin back in place. That's the hole at the rear of the frame. Push the pin in. And you see we're flush here on this side. So we're just going to countersink it just a little bit. We're countersunk on this side as well. Next, we're going to put our locking block pin back in. This is the top pin. It goes in the hole. Push it across. And then your punch, countersink that one where it's even on both sides. Next is going to be our trigger pin. I'm going to push the trigger pin in, and it's hitting the trigger. It won't go through. Pretty normal. Push down on the trigger bar while you're pushing in on the pin until the hole lines up and the pin slips through. Now, don't push the pin all the way through yet, because next we're going to install our slide stop or slide release. And the slide release is going to go right in here on the left side of the trigger. And the reason we went ahead and put this top pin in is because the spring on this little guy, this little spring here, is going to go under the locking block pin on the top. A lot of times guys will put this in first and then put the top pin in, and this spring will actually go over the top of the pin, and when it does, it lifts up on the slide release and the gun won't function properly. So now we're going to slide this little guy in, turn the pistol over where we can see, wiggle it until it lines up, push the pin on through, and then we take our punch there it is. And that pin's in. Now we have a completely reassembled frame. Let's move on to the top end and get started with that one. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is rebuild our striker assembly. We're going to take our striker, and this little rear piece, it's got a slot in it. It goes through and back, just like so. Next, our striker spring slides over, and then this is where either a 9mm casing or a 9mm socket really comes into play. So you slide your little back piece in. We're going to set this down on the table, and we're going to compress this spring below this groove right here. Your cups are going to engage right up in here, and the cups are going to install just like this. A little small flange that goes to the bottom, the larger flange goes to the top and retains the spring. You can see what it looks like from this side. I'm going to see if I can do this holding it up here. Yep. Cup goes down, slides in. Okay, so we've got our top cup in. I'm just going to roll it around to the bottom so it's easier to see. Next, we're going to put our other cup. That's just going to snap right on top, and this is what it'll look like when it's assembled. Okay, set that to the side. Now we're going to finish the slide. Here we have our slide. First thing that I'm going to do is put my safety plunger and spring back in. That's going to go in your hole here. Slide in and take your thumb and just depress it. Next is going to be our extractor. Same thing, press your extractor in. And then your extractor rod assembly is going to drop in this little hole on the right. Push that all the way in and make sure that you can see it fully engaged with your extractor on the side. The final piece is going to be our striker assembly. That's going to slide in. And now our back plate. The easy way that I found to do the back plate is go ahead and slip it in, get it started, put a little thumb pressure on it, take your small screwdriver, depress the back of the striker assembly first, and then your extractor assembly, and then push it up until it locks in place. Next is going to be our barrel. And then our guide rod assembly. Guide rod assembly, your small end is going to go with the small end, obviously. And the big end is going to rest back here on the back in this little cut right here. The little smiley face. Here we go. Maybe. Yep. Little smiley face is where your guide rod head is going to rest. We'll slip that in the front, depress the spring, and then we'll set that right in the little smiley face. Make sure that it's centered up. It goes on the pistol easier. And then if you have a muzzle device, go ahead and reattach your muzzle device at this point in time. Now, make sure your trigger is to the rear. Slide goes on the front rails, slides to the rear. Everything's assembled. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed this video on how to disassemble and reassemble your Glock 17. If you have any questions, make sure you post them in the comments section below. And as always, check out our affiliate links in the description. See you guys next time.